All right, so welcome to today's hot seat discussion where we are bringing you insights to answer the question of what's working now, coming directly from Fitness Revolution Coaching Partners. I'm your host, Justin Hanover, and I have been in the industry since 2008 and now a success coach with Fitness Revolution, committed to helping gym owners build the business they want. A couple things before we dive into today's hot seat discussion. I want to just quickly introduce our guest and also let you know at the end of the discussion, you will have the ability to get access to the same resources you will be hearing Joe talk about in a few minutes that helped shape the business he has today. So be sure to stick with us so you learn how to get access to those. Now for today's guest. Today, I have the pleasure of being able to talk with Joe Rouse. Joe started his business back in 2013 with the support and belief from his grandfather, who provided the opportunity, and Joe took it and ran with it. Since his humble beginnings, Joe has been able to take what once was a thought to a 3,000 square foot facility with multiple team members servicing over 150 clients. He has no plans of stopping there with growth in his sights. He is positioning his business to be able to run without relying on him. So that's a little background on Joe. And Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to spend it with us and sharing your journey and insights.
Yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. Excited to talk.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. So I thought before we kind of dive into some specifics, we'd start with giving the listeners some perspective on what things looked like in your business right before the pandemic hit, just so we have some understanding of the changes that you've made.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to put it, everything was literally booming in my business right before the pandemic hit. Like, no joke. Like just growing nonstop, never had growth like that before, that consistent. Had solid, we were in the transition of hiring some new employees, so getting a lot of onboarding systems in place. But yeah, I mean, literally right before the pandemic, just the busiest we'd ever been. Gross revenue was the highest it's ever been. An absolute blast, like all the time.
Awesome.
And then
that's what we all want.
Yeah.
What services were you offering at that time?
Really just large group training to adults and youth. Adults, we had up to 24 per session, and the youth were up, 12 to 16 per session. We had some personal training, but really not much at all, because really large groups is really what we love to do.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what was your client base at that time?
Primarily with the adult clients, like age 35 to 45, somewhere in there. People that want to be strong, fit, and confident and need to lose a little bit of weight, but are willing to focus on strength training to do it.
Okay. And how many did you have at that time?
We actually had gotten right around 220 before COVID, which was definitely a PR for us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's fantastic. And then you were doing auto draft, right, too?
Yeah, we've been doing auto draft for years.
Okay, awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay. So were there any other particular pieces of the business that were before COVID that aren't existing anymore?
That aren't existing? No, there's just more stuff going on now, I would say, like we'll talk about. Well, we don't go, we streamlined a few things, nothing crazy. Like we dropped to 16 per session, because we were all the way down to 10 per session, and
yeah,
now we're at 18. So we do have less people per session, and we raised our prices subsequently, which has been great because nobody has batted an eye at that lately, and it's been fantastic.
Okay. Well, that's something we're definitely going to want to dive into.
Yeah. Because
I'm sure that's been a fear for a lot of gym owners out there, because obviously, you have to raise your prices. With the added expense and then being able to service less people per time block, there's just no other way, obviously, to make it work. Increase your prices. So actually, let's just kind of hit on that real quick before we move forward. Talk about how did you go about it, obviously kind of coming to that realization you need to increase your prices, and how did you start rolling that out?
Well, I didn't raise it on current clients right now, because it would have been a lot of extra work in the system because we have, 7-year-long clients that are on different price points than others. The plan with them is just to raise the prices like 4%, something like that. I think it's like $5 a month roughly for most people. I can't imagine. I mean, and I've talked to people about it just person to person to kind of get their feedback, and everybody, not even like just my favorite people, just discussions. And they're like, we understand like this happened, expenses go up every year. So I think if I was going to offer anybody advice to raise prices on your current clients, you just got to keep it small and offer to do it after their current contract ends, which is the plan. On all new people, we just updated our pricing and changed it. We went from $129 a month on 3 times a week with large group to $139, and we went with 5 times. We got rid of unlimited because you really can't grow a business with unlimited when you have limited numbers per session. And then you always got to have the conversation of twice per day and tell them they can't do that and stuff too. So that's one thing that we did drop since COVID, unlimited. We also dropped open gym because we weren't charging for it. We're letting unlimited people come. If I ever add that back, I'll absolutely charge for it. But I don't really want to pay staff to be there during open gym. It's not worth the trade-off unless you've got a big, bunch of people paying for that. But with the price change, we went from $129 to $139, and we went from $149 up to $169 with the 5 times. And we sold more of the 5 times than we have the 3 times, which has been pretty good. So with raising the prices on new people, it's just a matter of getting my staff comfortable selling it. And I tell them, look, here's the prices everywhere else. I think what we do is better than everywhere else. You've got to, just because you might not be able to afford to pay for what we offer doesn't mean it's not worth what we're charging. And you just over and over again, our weekly team meetings just talk about, this is why we raised our prices and this is what we offer that's different from everybody else. And I did do that for a few weeks because they were having a little trouble with the raise in prices. But it's been good to go now.
Okay. No, that's fantastic.
It's always easy to raise it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like you hit on a really important point there. Obviously, the mindset and the belief behind it is what really matters. Okay, so I think that's obviously a perfect segue into kind of like the first part we want to dive into here with the sales. 'Cause I know a lot of people are struggling with sales right now and being able to convert people. Most gyms are not really hitting the rate that they were before. So I know that's an area that you have flourished in, especially using like the 5-step sales process. So I want to see if you could obviously talk on that, like a little bit more on how you kind of been mastering that yourself and implementing that into your team.
Yeah. So with the 5-step sales system, I made sure I went through the sales mastery course. I did that quite a long time ago. And then there's that shorter version that FR has with shorter videos. I had my staff all go through that, and I'm in the process of building out like me talking through the sales training into our onboarding systems. So once they've been with us for 30 days, they'll have modules they go through and train you that'll take them through the sales system. But what we did to train them now primarily is we started scheduling monthly sales meetings that were separate from our weekly team meetings, just to go through the sales training specifically, not just necessarily to go over numbers. And then we started adding sales training to the weekly team meetings instead of having separate sales meetings. So I had all of my staff go through the shorter version of the FR, the 5-step sales process videos that you guys have. And then we added that as a regular ongoing part of our weekly team meeting. And in those weekly team meetings, we'll go through like different situations that we have and discuss like how we could have made that situation go better if somebody didn't convert. But primarily, we role play over Zoom. It's much more comfortable to role play over Zoom with somebody you know than it is to do it face to face. So that's kind of helped a little bit with the role play because they're still not 100% bought into that. But that's the biggest contributor to any kind of sales training or helping people get better at sales training outside of just getting reps.
Yeah.
The role playing has been pretty huge. So I would say just ongoing, we had them watch the videos. We discussed each aspect of those, and then we have sales training for a 15-minute block of every weekly team meeting, and we don't miss weekly team meetings.
That's awesome. Okay. Is there anybody in your team that you, I guess, like don't necessarily want them to do sales, or okay, how do you decide who's going to start doing the sales in your team? Or is it kind of like, okay, like everybody's going to be trained on this?
Yeah. So the goal is, so I have a guy who's getting ready within the next year, especially if we continue to grow like we've started to grow again. I'll be looking into a second location. He should be my general manager, and he will be in charge of sales. He's not like an amazing sales personality, but he is trained and he can do it. He is good in developing relationships. If he's not good at it, when he becomes general manager, that'll be another conversation we'll have to have. But the plan is for him to take over most of the sales. I do the bulk of the sales right now because I have the most availability to meet with people at times of the day. But I wanted to make sure all of my coaches were prepared to take advantage of opportunities. And then the only other way we were able to get everybody involved and keep me from having to come back in the evenings when I didn't want to be there was to just let them know that there's a potential for you to get scheduled for a 30-minute initial coaching session, either before you start coaching or after you're finished coaching. So those are the times that we're going to schedule you out. And then we set it up in Zen Planner where every time we schedule somebody out for an ICS, they get an automated email 2 or 3 times, leading up to it to remind them that they have that. So the decision to have everybody do it was really just a convenience thing for me. Like, to be honest, like I don't want to be there all the time. And so everybody's going to get trained on this, but I definitely do the bulk of it. But in my mind, it makes sense to have people that are developing the daily relationships with these new folks that come in to go ahead and get the opportunity to sell.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes complete sense. So how long was the process when you started like implementing with this team to get them to the point where you felt at least comfortable enough to let them start, like I said, getting the reps in?
I pretty much threw them into it even without training, just to have them there and available. And then I made sure, so I do weekly one-on-ones with my part-timers. I now do bi-weekly instead of weekly. And we do pretty much everything over Zoom now because it's just more convenient. But that's where we would discuss how their sales, how their ICSs went, and what we could do to get better. We use that sales debriefing process. Not been overly consistent with it, but we have the spreadsheet created where they can write out like how the ICS went, what went wrong, did they convert, did they not convert? And we discuss that in our weekly one-on-ones. And then again, when we do the team trainings as well.
Yeah. So with the sales process itself, have you found any changes in your flow from pre-COVID to now?
Changes in my flow? Like, do you mean like stats, like conversions, or?
No, in your process of how you're interacting with leads.
So, well, I mean, our process interacting with leads has been the same. What really changed for us for the 5-step sales process primarily is what we did in person in the interactions with people, and really taking time after we build rapport. So we spent in those weekly meetings, we would spend at least 1 to 2 weeks on each step and focus on that step. And that's what we would role play through. So we role play through just building rapport. And then the next part of that specific step where we set the tone or the agenda for the meeting. And then the next week we focus on learning more about them and determining what their why is, and then discussing their goals and then how to transition between them and then go into the sale. But the biggest thing that's changed in terms of our in-person meetings is actually following all 5 steps and helping my team understand the importance of those 5 steps, even when it's very uncomfortable, and just teaching them different ways that work best for them to make it more comfortable. Like for me, when I was learning the 5-step sales system, I went to the live workshop that FR had, and I had done the sales mastery course, and I did the quick course. And then now I've actually done the one that they did recently during COVID that was over Zoom. By the way, I had all of my staff do that course as well. So like they had to come on live and I could see that they were there, which was, I think they all got a lot out of that. But the biggest thing that changed, is just going through those steps and using all 5 steps. And when I went through all those courses, it helped me to understand the importance of those steps and be able to communicate that importance to my staff. Because they're like, why do I need to know exactly why they're doing what they're doing? Like, can't we just talk about their goals and then tell them about what we have? And I'm like, no, we need to be able to understand why they're here and then understand what their goals are as a result of why they're here, so that we can then bring it back to, okay, well, this is what we offer. And I think that that's going to get you to, I think that's going to help you be able to run harder with your kids when in the yard playing soccer, you know what I mean? And be able to just snatch those kids up whenever you want to pick them up and wrestle with them or whatever it might be. And I think it'll help you hit that goal of 20 pounds. It might take us 3 to 6 months, but I think we can get that done. Here's our 6-month commitment. And just tying it back into what they want. So focusing on making everything about that person. And I said, this is how we do that. We follow the steps. And that's what we do.
Yeah. Could you just quickly, for the people listening that aren't aware of this process, just like run through the 5 steps? Like what those are?
Yeah. First, you start off building rapport. And this isn't a separate step, but then setting the agenda or setting the tone, letting them know, like, this is not saying this specifically, but letting them know, like, you know, you're here today to learn more about what we offer. We're going to see if it's a good fit, and then we'll talk about what we have, so they understand it's actually a sales consult. And that we have about 30 minutes devoted to them. After building rapport, oh my gosh, I got to have the specific names. Essentially, we want to find out why they're here after we've built rapport. And then we want to find out their true why, like not just, you know, I don't feel good, or I want to lose weight. That's not their why. Their why is like, I'm not confident around my spouse, or I don't feel like myself. And the thing you have to understand there, I did, is like, we don't have to dive into their deep, darkest desires. It doesn't require that. And I always was under that assumption as I was learning and going through this, like trying, you know, asking the 5 whys if we're doing that. But really just finding out, like, they want to set a good example for their kids. That's enough for me. Like, I can use that later in the sales process. So, gosh, I'm trying to remember the specific words for the 5-step sales process. Affirmations keeps coming to mind. But finding out why, and then we ask them what their specific goals are, and we want to help them then understand what's it like. We want to help them understand if it's going to be different. Like, what's it going to be like for you if you don't take any action, right? You just leave here, don't sign up, or don't start working out. How's life going to be for you? And that's where they'll get more into their pain points and issues that they're having. And then we can help paint the picture of, like, well, let's say you do join, let's go through this. What's it going to be like 6 months from now? And you've been working out 3 times a week. How do you think you're going to feel? Or we'll tie that back into whatever their goals are. And then that should be the first 4 steps. And then we go into the offer on the last step. If I remember, I'd have to read that out to you though. You might be able to say those. You might have that in front of you. I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, then you drive into getting the buy-in, basically, like getting them committed to wanting to take the next step with you. But I think, I know, have you personally tried other kind of sales things before this? Like, did you try doing scripts and stuff like that?
Yeah, I created an ICS. We used to call it a success session. Sheet to follow, questions to ask and stuff like that for my staff. And I really just found it was just more effective for us to just be able to talk to the people and really get to know them and simplify it down to, it just needs to be all about them. So they should be doing most of the talking. And that's going to give you the ability to recall and tie it back into them when you go for the sale, because they're here because they want to make a change, not because they're trying to buy a car or something like that. Like, we have something that can literally change their life, and other people have it too. So we've got to get them to understand why we're a good fit for them. I had done scripts. I hadn't really tried any other sales systems or anything. I'd probably done a little bit of reading, and I had some retail experience in the past making sales. That was about it.
Okay. No, yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out. Like what you said is actually just having an actual real conversation with people. And I think that's where people get lost sometimes in trying to follow these sales scripts from these different sales gurus out there. One of the biggest things, I mean, that you generally miss with trying to use a sales script is how it's delivered. Like that person that wrote that script wrote it for them, like and like the way that they speak, the way that like the tonality changes, and like everything, like that's all goes into being able to deliver a good script. But something that you can reproduce more is just having a framework, and having a conversation around it, and that's I think that's so important to point out here, and be able to share that with people, that it really is just comes down to like just connecting with people, having a conversation, understanding how to guide the conversation, to be able to get what you want out of it, and get them bought into the solution, but not have it feel robotic.
Yeah, it's huge. Like it's just having that conversation and learning about them, making it about them doesn't like decrease the importance of having that framework or having that system. And if you have consistent training with your staff on that system, then that system will naturally come into that conversation.
Yeah.
It's just like, I show up, I turn the lights on, I turn on the music, I turn on the fans. Like I go through, I build rapport, I set the agenda. You know what I mean? It just has to be, you have to get reps. If not, you have to role play.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any particular challenges that came up with like kind of getting your team on board with this, that maybe you initially weren't expecting and had to overcome?
I think I expected most of it because I had all the same ones. It was primarily just diving deeper into their why, as like some of my staff are men, some are women, and most of the guys, like the women were fine with it right out the gate, and the guys were like, this makes me uncomfortable. Then they were less comfortable having a more in-depth conversation about what somebody wants, than some of the women were. So that was a little bit of a hurdle I had to overcome with the guys. But it just, with regular training and just discussing it, like good leaders communicate the most important things over and over and over and over again, no matter how mundane they are. And just creating reps if they're not getting those live reps, and role playing, and then having that weekly discussion about it was pretty big. And now the current thing we're focusing on is we focus on different sales objections and coming up with solutions. That's what we've been going through the last few weeks.
Good. And then how you feeling like your team's like enjoying like learning this?
They do. I didn't think they would. Like I thought it would be kind of boring. Like, and we've actually just used some of the shorter 5-step sales system videos with Ryan Ketchum. We've even just played a couple of those in our staff meeting and then just discussed it. But then there's other times where we just review the specific step and how the step works, and then we role play that specific step. And I'll record that on Zoom, and then I plan to use that on our onboarding sequences so they can get examples of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And how long, and I didn't ask this before, but how long have you been kind of operating in this way of allowing your team to kind of handle the sales in the evening time?
I guess I've always done it. I just haven't normally scheduled appointments specifically for them. So we really dialed this in probably when we were able to open back up in person this past last June in North Carolina. That was when we started really visiting it. And I wanted to make sure, because I had a guy that took over for me in the evenings. I always ran our Monday, Wednesday, Friday evening sessions. I had somebody who did Friday evenings for me. And the new guy I hired took over Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, and I gave him my Mondays and Wednesdays during COVID for the virtual stuff. So when we went back in person, and now he's the main guy that's there in the evenings, he needed to be trained in sales, and we just took it as a whole staff to go back into it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So before we move on from the sales, and like last thing I wanted to kind of hit on is just seeing if you can share any possible insights within the actual sales conversation. Have you felt like anything has changed in the way that the conversation goes with the prospect? Are there new hurdles you're finding within the conversation, or has it pretty much been normal and no real change in people's behaviors within that conversation?
I mean, for me, the biggest change was actually learning their why, and then discussing their goals, and then helping them understand a little bit about what we offer, and then tying it back to their why and their goals, and being able to discuss with them how it's a good fit. Whereas before, it would be a lot of building rapport, and then a lot of explaining what we offer. And then it depends on the type of person you're dealing with in terms of what questions they ask. And then, telling them the price. And it'd be really, really awkward unless, you always got the people that come in and it's just, they know what they're looking for. But so really just following that framework, which for me has kind of been dialed into rapport, why, goals, and then asking for the sale essentially.
Okay.
But having the opportunity to build value.
You don't feel like there's been any, I guess you'd say more friction with getting people to move forward with you? Like you don't feel like the pandemic has necessarily affected that?
No, if anything, it just gives us a common talking point to discuss. It makes it easier to build rapport. And if I feel like anything's weird or awkward, I just continue building rapport. I think some people struggle with that. Like after you say like, how was your weekend? What do you do for a living? Like I just keep asking questions, just keep going and going. And I know it's not supposed to be that long of a part of the conversation, but it de-escalates the conversation and helps people feel more relaxed and comfortable.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I'm sure it's different for each person. I mean, I'm sure there's some people where you feel that rapport is built a lot faster and you don't need to keep asking, and you can keep moving on. And then there's people that obviously it's a little, you have to ask more questions to get to that point where you feel like, okay, we've established some common ground here. Mm-hmm. And so it can move forward. But okay, so I mean that's great to know that like you really don't feel like this past or the current things that people have gone through, it really hasn't necessarily changed their buying behavior. It probably just comes down to a lot of, again, like what you brought up before, the belief that you, the person controlling the conversation, has going into the conversation. So I think like somebody that probably is going into the sales conversation concerned or worried that this person won't sign up because of this or that, whatever, then that's probably obviously going to affect the conversation.
Yeah, I think all of that, all of the worry, the concern takes place before they ever get in the building. So even if they become a lead, that would be dealt with in the conversation with the lead in the process of scheduling usually.
Yeah.
That was kind of how it all worked out with COVID specifically.
Awesome. All right. So, I mean, just to quickly recap that. I mean, obviously, I think for you guys listening, the biggest takeaways to grab from implementing this sales process is obviously having a solid and proven framework to how you guide the conversation and keeping it like a human interaction. And then the power of consistently working on this in role play and how that like just ingrains it into you and becomes second nature. So I just want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little about your services. I know you had, obviously, like you said before, you were mainly focusing on the group stuff, really not much private. Now I understand that has switched a little bit. Could you talk on that a little bit, how you've adjusted your service offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. So it all goes to, my main focus is, maximizing client value right now and increasing the amount that each client is worth. And one way to do that was to add a higher ticket item and just get clients in right out the bat on a higher price. And so we started looking at semi-private partially because of that, and then partially to be able to offer something to people where there was less people around, there was more space, and to be able to appeal to those people that might have anxiety surrounding a larger group atmosphere. But from a marketing perspective, I went back and forth on, well, do I spend more money marketing to the people I'm already marketing to, or who might have those concerns, or do I spend time marketing to a population that's not really marketed to around here as much, which is the older adult population, or 50 to 60, 60 to 70. And I knew that on Facebook, I know that older age range, that's the biggest population on Facebook. And I knew that my main marketing at the outset would be Facebook ads through LEM, which I use. So I just decided to roll with it and go with that older population and kind of niche that semi-private. And it took a little bit of time to figure the ads out because it's harder to market a higher ticket item with lead ads. But we just had to get a decent amount of ad spend and go through those leads. And we got 4 or 5. We got 5 in the door, got 4 into FEOs, and then we got 2 of those into COs so far. And we'll probably get 1 more. And now I cut the ads off after that because we're only going to take 15 to 20 people in it. And I'm about to cut the ads back on so that we can try to continue rolling with it. but it just allows us to really dial in and make it a worthwhile service with as much behind it as our large group offering in terms of follow-up and all those processes, making them a part of the community, everything. But yeah, that was my main focus, increasing client value and looking for ways to increase the amount of money we can make within this space. And the coolest part was we could only offer it at 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., which like is always hard. And that was another reason for going for the older adult.
Okay. That's interesting.
So to make money at that time of the day is great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's typically not happening. So what, did you able to pretty much fill most of those spots?
No, I mean, we just the 2 so far, like that's all we've marketed to, and then we quit marketing it. Okay. And I'm about to cut those ads back on. So we got a ton of leads with that age group like right away, and they just kept rolling in every day. So we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to go after some old leads. And then I don't want to take too many because I've really only got one coach in charge of it. So like I didn't want this, again, I didn't want to increase the amount of coaching that I'm doing. So we created the systems, him and I met, and that was our main focus in his weekly one-on-ones. We're building out the programming system that we use for it so that we could save him time in programming, discussing how we're going to pay him for programming, and then aligning those times or aligning his schedule so he can make those times and all that good stuff. So we'll probably add like 3 or 4 more so that it doesn't overwhelm him with the sales process, and then cut those ads off and then do it again.
Okay. So
hopefully it'll be as easy as it was the first time.
Yeah, that's always the goal. Have you tried converting existing members to this offer?
I haven't gone for that much yet because I'm married to the deal of working with the older adults with this. Yeah, that's the main reason why. Like we put flyers up, but I haven't done any really concrete marketing to my current members about it. I'm actually thinking about marketing it to them to tell their parents about, is what I'm considering doing.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I definitely like that approach. I mean, we've been seeing that as a commonality with different gyms across the country now, targeting that older demographic that maybe obviously before you weren't. And like you said, it's kind of like a little bit of a blue ocean, I guess, if you will, because most people don't target that market. They're usually after that 30 to 40 range is where most people try to attract to when it comes to advertising and stuff like that. So that's definitely, I think that's a good pivot in perspective that we're seeing from different gym owners, and it's working well. How long have you been rolling out the semi-private now?
It's only been a month at the most.
Okay.
I spent a lot of time prepping for it because I wanted all of the automated follow-ups and all that stuff in place in Zen Planner and programming system dialed in. Like I really wanted it to be a good program and all be nailed down so that it involved me the least amount as possible.
And how many people are you allowing per semi-private slot?
So anywhere from 1 to 5, and we've got it opened Monday through Thursday at 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. So he's basically personal training right now, but they all understand that it's going to go up.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. And how are you structuring the membership for that? Like, is it strictly just semi-private, or are they also getting access to the group as well?
So we've just done right now just semi-private for them. I think if I was targeting that younger age group, but I really don't want this older age group coming into our large group because it's not a good long-term fit for the type of lifting, the heavy stuff that we're doing. And then even when you modify for certain people, like everybody can say, oh, everybody can come to my training. We've accepted that we don't think everybody should come to our training. Yeah. Because there's a point where it's like you continue to modify, and it's like they're not gonna get the best. They're not gonna get as much benefit from the training because of the amount of things we're changing or modifying, or the fact that they want to use a barbell and maybe they shouldn't. Now they got to go super light because they're using a barbell or something like that. So we're really just trying to keep them in semi-private with this older age group. Yeah.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And what type of, I guess you'd say, like, how you been like kind of like speaking to this older age group? Has there been any like new challenges that have come up with working with the older population?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton so far. There was some at first, so we had to dial in the ads a little bit. And you also asked me how I structured it. I knew I forgot part of your question. We kept it the same as our large group membership. So we do 6-month commitments, and they can come 1 time a week or 2 times a week with semi-private. And it was $279 a month for 2 times a week. We did add a 3-time option, which goes up to like $420 a month, I think, for semi-private. So that's with those prices, we don't need to add a lot of people either. So we've had one person who has not signed up yet because he's concerned about the 6 months, but I'm pretty sure we'll still get him. And then one other person who ended up saying she could not afford it. And then the other 2 jumped on it right away. The biggest obstacle at first was dialing those ads in so that people understood that it was not a low ticket item, because that's generally what you're seeing on Facebook ads. So we had to have them add a line to the ad copy that was like, are you willing to invest? It was, I think it was like $5 or $10 a day, something like that, into whatever it was to equal out to the pricing, to help them understand that it was going to be a higher cost. And then we do make sure that we don't just discuss like the cost of the FEO, like we make sure we discuss the full cost of the program so they already know what to expect when we have that initial sales consultation. But that was the biggest obstacle at first, was we got a flood of leads in, and almost all of them were just like too expensive, too expensive, too expensive. The 2 and 3 p.m. didn't even matter. The too expensive was what mattered. But the ones we got in the door, we've been able to get them into training, at least in FEO, and we make money off the FEO too.
What's your FEO?
So we're just doing 2 weeks at $139 for 2 sessions a week. I may raise that price and go to 3 sessions a week just to give them more of a taste of it. We do longer FEOs with our large group just because we do a lot of like bigger lifts and things that take more time to learn. And we really learned that when people do shorter FEOs with us, we do not close at nearly as high of a percentage as we do with the 28-day FEO. So right now we're closing at about 50% on the 2-week FEO. So we'll see if we need more time than that. I'm just going to kind of watch the numbers.
Yeah, that's what it's about, is looking at the numbers and tracking the numbers and not making decisions from feelings. It's looking at facts. So I think that's another point to point out, especially for people that are testing new things right now. It is obviously a little bit of uncharted waters, and that's why it's so important to track everything, so you know what's working, what's not working, and how to adjust your efforts moving forward. So before, like obviously the pandemic and happened, everything, like, were you even considering offering semi-private, or this strictly was stemmed because of everything that happened?
It was a decision I made specifically from COVID, and wanting to, and really having trouble growing because of COVID, and wanting to find other ways to increase revenue. Okay.
And so like, what's your, I guess, a future outlook with the semi-private service?
I would like to have it ongoing at 15 to 20 people, like still at that time of the day. I really, as of now, wouldn't like to add any other times for it. And just add it as a way for us to increase revenue during what's normally a dead time, like maximize what we can do within these 4 walls. And it'll contribute pretty significantly to our gross revenue. And then moving forward, when I open a second location, having it there as well, probably it would be part of what we'd offer, like right out the gate with a new location.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. Have you still been growing in the group side too?
We are now. Like March has been a major jump for us. And it's interesting because we almost can't, like, I guess I already am paying, but we can't buy a lead right now from Facebook for large group. Like, it's almost impossible to get our leads. But my ad account got shut down because I don't know why they do that sometimes. And they shut it down, so my ad account wasn't running, and it just happened to be when we ran a big promotion. We did a 2-week Bring a Friend promotion where, like, my coaches compete, like they push out flyers they have their own color with their name on it, and my coaches compete for cash. So, like, whoever gets the most flyers back for pushing those out, my coaches win cash, and then people push those flyers out because they have coaches that are their favorite, but also because it's 2 weeks for free, and last time we did this was probably 4 years ago for 2 weeks. So, and then there's prizes for the members too, but we've gotten 24 leads, and which would also be 24 FEOs if we count the Bring Your Friends as FEOs. And it's just been a massive jump for us, like compared to what we were doing. And then some of those, and then closing the semi-privates at the same time. I think we've closed, I'd have to go back and look. I don't know my send planner password on this new laptop I'm on. So I was going to pull the numbers right before we got on here.
Yeah.
But I would say like out of those 24 FEOs, we've probably closed, see, that's a couple. And we've probably closed 6 to 8 COs in large group out of that just within this last 2 weeks. And then we had other people who were on our regular evergreen FEO we started closing more of. And we closed those semi-private clients. So March has just been a massive change.
Nice. Okay.
Like,
so are you feeling like we're moving in a positive trend with people getting more comfortable, coming back out, and wanting to get back to some normalcy?
Yeah. I mean, and we start, I think we're going to talk about Google ads, but that's increased our leads. So we went from Facebook being our primary driver of our lead source to our website actually picking up, and Google ads. And that's where I was, because my main concern is after this Bring a Friend is because my Facebook ads have not been performing, is like, how are we going to drive the volume of leads that I like to get now that people are more willing to come in and more willing to sign up? But that's probably where it's going to have to come from our website. Hopefully Facebook will pick back up again. I hope.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's always important to have like different channels. And like, cause like one's always, I mean, it ebbs and flows. It's like when one goes down, you have another one that's working. When that one goes down, the other one's, I mean, it's like, so that's why it's always important to be able to diversify a little bit with your marketing approach. Because I mean, not one way is guaranteed to always work forever.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important point to make. I think, especially through this time, I think this experience is obviously just one of the good things is obviously people who are looking at from a healthy perspective, how this has exposed weaknesses in businesses, and now it's about fixing those weaknesses. And one of those potential weaknesses could be obviously relying on only one channel for your marketing effort. So I think that's another really powerful point to make with people. But I think it's just another, I think, positive message to put out there too, that you are growing in your group side and your semi-private. You're getting more leads coming in. I think again, like gym owners out there need to keep hearing like this positivity that things are coming back. People are reaching out now and like wanting to get back into routines and work at facilities. And now, if anything, I mean, we're probably going to see a bigger boom, even more so for like more of like the private facilities, things like that, like more individualized approach, rather than, again, like a lot of the bigger gyms have closed due to this time because they couldn't sustain it. So it's like now it's like, okay, now's the time to really like push your marketing efforts out there, because people are wanting to get back into something.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity right now. I think people getting vaccinated, numbers going down in a lot of places, like people that were worried. Like I have a client who's been on virtual since the very beginning. It's been over a year. And she just told me today, she's like, I booked my sessions the week of the 19th. I'll be back. She got her second vaccination. I'm just like, it always feels so good when those, she's a 6 or 7 year long client. So
wow. Okay.
It's great to have her come back in person. I really think just getting more phone calls, getting more referrals, it's just all of it has gone up. All of it. I'm sure the weather helps too, but I mean, people are just less. It's just less. They're less worried with the vaccine, I think. Yeah.
No, and that's a good thing. As we need to keep putting that message of positivity, we're moving in a good direction. So I think it's really important to highlight that. So now I do want to talk a little bit more on your team, because I know a lot of gym owners have been struggling with that through this process of obviously from either having to let team members go, to struggling to keep team members engaged, or like kind of like feeling like kind of safe or certain with the direction that the business is going in. And that's something that you've been doing really well. So I mean, you can share a little bit on how you have been keeping your team like bought in to the business, and keeping them performing at a high level.
So just spending time developing them and being consistent with the promises I make to them in terms of meetings. So our weekly team meetings every single week, not missing those as much as possible. And then we're now bi-weekly one-on-ones, but having those meetings with them as well, and just making sure that I'm over communicating, if anything. Those are probably the most important things, is just having those one-on-one meetings, giving them those times to ask questions, encouraging them to ask questions and be prepared for the meetings, giving them a framework to use in those meetings, which I got from FR. And then the framework that we use in our team meetings is been adapted from FR's, but it's very, very similar. And being consistent with those is the biggest thing. And I got all of that from FR's. I learned it a long time ago through the FBAS system, but they have the course Think Like a Manager, and that kind of breaks it down and gives you some really good resources to help with that. And that was probably a pretty big turning point for me. It was just going through that course, and I had my staff go through that course as well. But I didn't really do a lot of special stuff like events or get-togethers. Like, we still had our employee Christmas party. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for them. And I'm always looking for ways to get better, even when they might resist me somewhat. So I spend a lot of time working on getting buy-in, like when I change things, but I also think that keeps it more exciting for them and less mundane when you're always finding ways to get better that matter, like significant ways, like whether it's logistically in a training session or it might be some new equipment, whatever it is, and then just making sure that they all have an idea of what it is and what's coming. And the last thing is we started using Slack, like the communication app. That's helped a lot with all the in-between communication. And if I've got like a decision I make and I'm going to push it out to our members real quick on Facebook, I'll make sure I go in Slack and just send all the information to my staff before I do that.
So is like the structure you've been using with your team, with the team meetings and stuff like that, has that been something that you were doing before the pandemic, and obviously it's just been kind of continuing on as business as usual, or is that something that you started doing during that time?
It is something I was doing before the pandemic. I went through the Think Like a Manager course way back when it was first created. And I also read, I think it's Think Like a Manager. No, that's the name of the course. How to Be an Effective Manager.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
It's a really good one. I mean, it's not like the most exciting listen, but it was, it just goes so hard. It really reinforced what I was learning from FR, and we went really hard on the importance of the one-on-one meetings with your staff and letting your staff start those meetings, you not being the one that does all the talking, and then sticking to that format and being consistent. At least I think it was 89% of those meetings. That was where they found that staff turnover decreased significantly, was when you were consistent with those meetings, and the staff was the ones that led those weekly one-on-ones. So that was a big thing for me, and then using FR's framework to help implement it. I did that long before COVID, but we got more consistent, or I would say more convenient, with just the maximizing of Zoom. Like, we went from, it was always like, you got to be in person for these team meetings. It was really inconvenient, hard to get everybody there. And we have some people on Zoom, and we just weren't set up technologically for it. Well, now we've got all the technology like in the world for everything we bought, for this virtual stuff. And so everything's done over Zoom meeting wise. And that's made a big, big, big difference.
Yeah, I like that. That's I think it's, again, another thing that was exposed to this process of a weakness, and something that really wasn't efficient, of trying to force physical meetings and have people be there. And I know I went through the same thing with my facility of always struggling to find times that can work for everybody. And then sometimes it just wasn't going to happen. And then obviously, as you know, when you start breaking that consistency with having the meetings, and then things start falling apart. So I think that's, again, another important perspective, to not necessarily make decisions in your business with like bias attached to it, and being able to be open to changes. And one of those changes, obviously, with how you do your team meetings and having it be virtually, and let your team feel comfortable. Like, so it's in the sense of like the time that they picked, and not feeling like they have to rush to get someplace. I think it makes complete sense, and it just takes stress out of the situation, and it allows it to be a more enjoyable process for the team.
It has. It's just led to more consistency.
Yeah, which is absolutely huge. So was there any, like, going through that course, Think Like a Manager for yourself, or anything in particular that you can possibly remember that kind of was like a switch for you of like how you used to operate to after that?
I assigned a module to each employee, and each employee had to give an in-service to us at our staff meeting on their specific area. And I think that helped them own the information a little bit more. In terms of what I learned from that course specifically that I would say take away would be the analogy they use of decision-making. And that allowed me to communicate like how the flow of decisions goes in our business with the tree analogy, right? Like leaf decisions being, pretty much anybody can make those, and then branch decisions, probably going to need to get permission from your direct manager. The manager can make that decision. And then you go on a trunk, which would probably still be a manager decision. I hope I would trust my manager to make that. Generally speaking, they might want to coach them up along that process there. And then you get into the roots, which are, top level decisions. Because if you screw those up, the whole tree dies.
Yeah, that is true. And so, I mean, how do you feel, obviously, since you've been doing this before everything started, how do you feel this has allowed you to keep running your business at a high level through this past year, being able to have your team all on the same page?
I would say like kind of having them on the same page was the most important part, and already having the framework and the structure to do that before COVID is probably what allowed us to be ready to rock with it. There was definitely plenty of extra meetings in there at first. But just everybody being willing to pivot and adapt very quickly. Our ability to maintain, I guess, throughout was partially due because our gross revenue stayed relatively consistent, because a lot of people kind of hung with us. It really took a dive after we opened back up. But having that consistent gross revenue, I think we were able to offer a consistently good service for being virtual because of that regular communication and always understanding like how things are changing. Here's how you got to hook up the tablet. Here's how you got to hook this camera up. Here's our best practice for during the warm up. Here's a question of the day to engage people, stuff like that.
No, I mean, that's such a good point. And I just want to highlight that, like for you listening to this, if you're like that gym owner that has not dialed in your team management and having your team on board, then now is the time to start making that happen. Like, don't wait. I know this typically is not the favorite subject to focus on, or like the kind of like the sexy thing to do within your business. But it's so vital, especially at being as the business owner and your leader, being in that leadership role. That's your job, like, is to make sure that your team is all on the same perspective and working towards the common goal. So like these things, I mean, it's not like Joe said, like it's not necessarily the most fun thing to go through, but getting this dialed in and getting this right is going to make everything so much better and a lot less headaches for you down the road. And especially, I mean, we're going to have something else happen again. I mean, it's not necessarily a pandemic, but I mean, something else is challenging is going to happen, whether it be a weather event or something's going to happen. You can count on that. Yeah. And
we have plenty of hurricanes around here.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, so it's like, are you going to be ready, and is your team going to be ready to be able to execute and do what they need to do? That's the most important thing. So I think that's like the biggest takeaway to walk away from that, is how well you've been able to do that because you already had this instilled into your team.
Absolutely.
So as we work towards wrapping up this conversation, I just want to kind of get your perspective on mentorship in that sense. So I mean, like, obviously I know that you value mentorship, but I want to kind of have you be able to speak to those out there that have been trying to go this alone, especially this past year of going solo with this. Like, how do you feel being able to have mentorship and have a support system and have people to talk to has helped shape your business, and especially going through this challenging past year?
I think it's been pivotal in my business, and I happen to get involved with the I don't think you call it accelerator program anymore. The high performance coaching program, I think, is what's called now. Very early on through a trial, like a 1-month trial, and then I kept going with it, and I honestly don't think I would always try to find a way to succeed, but I don't think my business would be operating the way that it is now had I not had that mentorship and that support in place. Where it started for me, and this is probably where it's a good place for most people to start, is just to have, hook up with a success coach and then, have them hold you accountable and actually do what they're going to hold you accountable for, and be consistent in your meetings with them, just like we talked about with employees. And then when as soon as it's possible, getting to at least 2 live meetings a year where you get face-to-face with some other fitness business owners, that's going to help you communicate with them outside of that meeting more often and create some connection with them, which I think is vital. The in-person stuff is vital in my opinion. I know I just talked about Zoom, but for this stuff, the in-person is huge because it pulls you out of your business and you really don't have the option to do much work on your business, or work in your business, I guess. So that's where I started, and that's where I'd recommend a lot of newer business owners starting, is getting with your success coach, being consistent with that, and then getting to those live meetings as soon as that's a possibility again. I think there's probably something over Zoom now too. And then when FR thinks you're ready and when you can progress, getting into a mastermind group where you're meeting with the same people every single month. You got your quarterly meetings that you go to live when that starts again, and you still have your success coach, and it all aligns. It's very, very helpful. But I talk to my people in my group a lot outside of just the meetings that we have as well. And we really get to know each other. We care about each other. We got each other's backs. And having those people to lean on is huge psychologically when you're going through something like COVID, because everything sucks. And a lot of things still do suck. Like, I've got somebody in my mastermind group who has 3 or 4 locations for her yoga practice. And our conversation in our meetings was around I've got this much money. We can last about another month, right? Like, because this location can't open up because 2 of them were in California. So she couldn't open up. And that's a pretty major conversation to have and to consider and to have to talk about. So having somebody to lean on for conversations like that is huge, because for me, even like my wife is wonderful and she's a part of our business now, and she's as passionate about it as I am. She's really good at going after like decline cards and getting money that's not, all that stuff, which I love because I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
Very, very good at that. And it's been huge. We've probably gained so much revenue because of her. But, we don't want to have her tied up in the business too long. But regardless, it's always, as a business owner for me, it's very, it's that saying is it's very lonely at the top. Really, really lonely. And when you go through something like COVID, it's particularly lonely. And you've got to have somebody to talk to who understands what you're going through, and somebody who, when you get to those in-person times where it's like, they're excited to talk about business 75% of the time, you might just be hanging out in a hotel lobby or going out to dinner or getting a beer or whatever it might be, like people that you can keep just getting all the business stuff out to, and they want to talk back and forth and go through ideas, right? Like, because not everybody wants to talk about that. And most people don't understand that. Not everybody has an entrepreneurial mindset or even a business or management mindset. And you need to surround yourself with people that doesn't mean they have to have the same thoughts or the same opinions, but at least just a mindset of growth and owning something and being held accountable for it and wanting to, take care of it and watch it grow. Because that's just always been a thing for me. I think I was lucky to have the coaching that I had from the beginning. Honestly, like, my true story is that I did a trial and I didn't take good advantage of it and I forgot to cancel. So then I was under a contract and I was like, all right, I'm going to maximize what I get out of this now. And I just went for it. And then I went to my first live meeting and I was like hooked after that live meeting. Nick was there. There was several other FR folks there. But it's just, personally for me, like, it can be very anxiety inducing to just be alone, like focusing on things. Like, I have the guy I'm going to promote to a general manager, but he doesn't have an owner mindset. He doesn't foresee problems and necessarily consider solutions before they ever happen, because it's not a problem now. So it's just a different mindset, and being around and conversating with and building relationships with people like that is very, very, very valuable. Not just financially or physically, but psychologically too. Probably more psychologically than anything.
Oh, definitely. I totally agree. And I love what you said there, how it's lonely at the top. And that's so true. And I think that's one of the most undervalued parts of mentorship is how powerful it is just to, like you said, be surrounded by the right people and be able to sometimes just talk things out, and just be able to talk it with people that understand what you're going through. That is so powerful. And like for those that are still trying to do this by yourself, like you're making this a lot harder than it has to be. And that's just the truth. That's a fact. And you don't see highly successful people, high performers that do it by themselves. You have to surround yourself with other high performers, because it's important to get different perspectives on problems that you're experiencing, different situations that you're going through, and help you keep in the right framework, because there's going to be days when you're down, and being around high performers, obviously it's going to naturally lift you up, versus just continuing to be by yourself and prolong that negative state. So I think that's one of the most powerful perspectives. Because I mean, like, resources are great. Obviously having knowledge and information is fantastic, but it's only good if you actually apply it and effectively apply it to your business as well. And that's the most important thing. And I think we're in that kind of a stage now where there's so much information available to people that they don't do anything with. and
it's easy to get overwhelmed, especially if you do. It's very easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so now it's just about, I think, cutting back and simplifying things and really just getting better at executing and getting more comfortable with executing on things, rather than just keep looking for the next system or process that's going to possibly change things for you. But I really obviously appreciate your perspective on that, and in this whole conversation in general. I mean, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you kind of opening up to us and taking the time out of your day to spend it giving back to the community. That's really what this is about, is help everybody raise up and to keep improving, especially with what we've been going through this past year. And we really appreciate obviously everything you shared, and I'm sure everyone watching this will also agree with me how beneficial this time has been. So I mean, thank you so much, Joe.
Yeah, I was happy to do it, man. I hope people can get a couple things out of it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I'd be surprised if they don't. But before we wrap up here, I just, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, of the hot seat, I wanted to offer to you guys an opportunity to get access to some of the resources that we discussed, and as Joe shared, had an impact on where he's at right now in his business. So to make it really simple for you, all you have to do is just email me at justin@frnation.com, and in the subject line, either put sales to get access to our 5-step sales process, semi-private to get access to our different training guides, or team to get access to team management resources. And I will get those resources over to you right away. And on top of that, I'll even do one better. Because as I just mentioned, getting the resource is great, but being able to apply it effectively is where the magic happens. So I'll be guiding you through the resource to make sure that you're actually getting the most out of it. So again, I'm not just going to hand you a PDF and like, here, have at it. It's like, no, I'm actually going to check in with you, guide you through it, making sure that you understand how to actually apply it to your business. And again, all you have to do is just email me at justin@frnation.com and either enter in sales, semi-private, or team into the subject line. I look forward to being able to connect with you and being a part of your journey. Again, Joe, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it. And that's it for today's What's Working Now Hot Seat. And we will see you guys on the next one.
Right on. Thank you.